So this week is going to be super easy. I have 3 very, very simple questions for you. Where is your joy? All right, somebody's got an answer right quick. All right, let's see if you can do the second one. Who is God? Cat got your tongue? All right. And what makes you Magnificat? Cookies I have over here. A little bit of a quieter answer. Simple, right? This past week, I have been embarrassingly obsessed with a tweet. You see it on the bulletin cover. It's not new. I'm behind the times. It's from a year ago. But it's so classic. It's recently been making the retweeting rounds again. And it isn't really exactly my Christology, but it just tickles the heaven out of me. You all know that old 90s Christmas song, right? Mary, did you know that your baby boy... You know this song? Such a beautiful melody, full of patriarchal assumptions that Mary must be completely oblivious to the powerful future awaiting the baby inside her own body. Christians have been singing this beautiful query for decades. Mary, did you know? And the answer, as found in this tweet and as found in today's ancient testimony, is yes, Mary freaking knew. We can probably stop asking her and give her some freaking credit. Right there, in the Gospel of Luke, we actually have Mary's astonishing answer, an ancient song of joy, recorded for all to see and hear and absorb, revealing that Mary not only completely conceives, but also loudly celebrates exactly what God is doing inside her. And this song of personal joy, magnifying into universal joy, is called the Magnificat. And here's its basic structure. Mary, having just learned that she is to give birth to an amazing baby, employs the style of all kinds of ancient Jewish songs of joy from centuries before her, and basically proclaims that the joy inside her soul has the power to magnify, to grow, to stretch, to encompass all of creation. She takes her own joy and expands it to tell a joyful story of how God's work in the world can bring equanimity and joy to all. Yes, Mary freaking knows. And more than that, Mary basically says, if God's joy can be inside me, a lowly, oppressed, common Jewish girl, then that proves that God's joy is completely uncommon and has the strength to flip and reshape all of the power structures of this world. Because let's be clear, joy is not fleeting, momentary happiness. Joy is deep, abiding, love-fueled justice. So Mary's famous now. So we tend to read this poem of hers and reimagine it as if it's like a Broadway showstopper, a big Broadway production number where some loud chorus is about to kick in and Mary hits all of the Idina Menzel high notes, and the audience then erupts in applause. But if we actually look at the scene here, Mary's just chilling with her cousin Elizabeth. They're both pregnant. They're both a bit bewildered and scared because one of them is too old and the other one of them is too young. And Mary's Magnificat is really just a simple, quiet poem of deep, joyful wisdom and trust. So if a simple, quiet poem of deep, joyful wisdom and trust is really what a Magnificat is. What makes you Magnificat? Now, I know none of us are technically pregnant with Jesus. Let me know. And I know that my English teacher mother would kill me if she knew I were doing this right now, but I want Magnificat to be a verb. What makes you Magnificat? I want us to Magnificat all over the place. This Advent, I want us to not just keep alert to the bad stuff that's happening around us. I want us to keep alert for the good, beautiful, poetic stuff that's happening all around us. I want us to be a congregation that Magnificats no matter what. No matter what unhappiness comes our way, I want us to Magnificat because joy is not a momentary, fleeting happiness. Joy is a deep knowledge that no matter what, God is with us, Emmanuel. And this is not just a Magnificat challenge for all of you. I'm challenging myself because, folks, this week has not made it very easy to Magnificat. This past Wednesday, the folks at New Sanctuary Coalition asked me to visit the ICE office at 26 Federal Plaza to post bond for an immigrant friend of ours who was currently in detention. And it didn't even occur to me that Wednesday had been declared a national day of mourning in honor of George H.W. Bush, and that therefore the ICE office would possibly be closed. Now this is my fault, right? I listen to NPR, I read the New York Times, I constantly troll Facebook. I have no excuse. I should have heard that there was a national day of mourning and that the building would possibly be closed. But I, unwitting, trekked down to Federal Plaza in my clergy collar drag, which I basically only wear for ordinations, protests, and visits to ICE. And when I arrived, I came upon a locked door surrounded by several dozen immigrants, parents, children, elderly folks, all standing in the freezing cold. They had all arrived for their scheduled check-ins, ordered to show up on Wednesday, December 5th, or risk deportation. So this National Day of Mourning had been called. 26 Federal Plaza was closed, and therefore the check-in office was closed, and none of these folks could do the thing that they had so diligently arrived to do. But no one had told them that the office was closed. They had traveled there. They had taken the day off from work, having done whatever they needed to do to be sure to get their children in tow, and this was maddening enough, but it would have been slightly more palatable if there were someone there telling these folks exactly what they needed to do, when they needed to arrive, what they might expect moving forward. But instead, there was just one somewhat bewildered security guard turning people away with absolutely no further information. So I asked this guard if news of the closing had been sent out, and he said, well, I heard it on the radio. Another NPR listener. And so this crowd of folks was standing there frozen, frightened that if they left, they would somehow miss a new communication, that they would miss their new appointment date, and that if they missed a new communication, if they missed information about their new date, they would be in danger of deportation. So I decided to wait with these terrified folks for a while, feeling a bit self-conscious in my clergy drag. And every once in a while, one of these folks gathered would say to me, "Thank you, Father. Bless you, Father." And this actually happens a lot at Federal Plaza. Usually I try to explain that I'm not really a priest, that I'm actually just a hippie, bleeding heart liberal minister from Greenwich Village. But I haven't really found an articulate way to differentiate myself from a Catholic priest when I'm in my clergy drag, no matter what I say. So eventually, reluctantly, folks just started wandering off. And I, after pushing a few more times with this guard for more and more information, I eventually just angrily stomped back to Judson, cursing ice, cursing God, cursing the wind chill factor. So the next day, I had thawed out, and I was all fired up. And so I was ready to come back and demand some information. And folks, I cannot begin to effectively describe the chaos that I encountered. It was 10 a.m., and usually at that time, many of you know, because you've done accompaniments, usually at that time there's maybe like 50 people in the waiting room by 10 a.m. But when I arrived that morning, there were hundreds, all confused about their check-ins. Some had been scheduled the day before. Some were there because they had been scheduled for that day, but were now waiting in line behind the people who had been scheduled for the day before. And so, after I posted bond for our friend who had sat in detention for one more day, which makes some people money, actually, and as I waited the 4 hours it takes for that bond process to go through, I decided to do some investigating. I was wearing my clergy drag, remember, which acts often as sort of like a combination invisibility cloak and secret password, so I was ready to go. So I approached one of the security guards and I started a conversation. I said, "May I ask about yesterday's closing and how it affected those who were supposed to check in yesterday?" And she said, "They can just come back today." And I said, "But did anyone tell them not to come yesterday?" And she said, "They didn't tell us until 2 p.m. Tuesday afternoon." And I said, "But did anyone tell those who were supposed to check in yesterday to not come in yesterday?" And she said, "They can just come in today. See all the people here?" And I said, "Yes, I see all the people here. But the folks who showed up yesterday were scared." And she said, "Of what? Just come back today." And I said, "But they take off from work and other things in order to get here for their scheduled appointments." And she said, "So they can take off from work and come today." And I said, "But they're missing out on pay and could be penalized or fired." And she said, "Believe me, I would rather have worked yesterday than just stay home." And I said, "That's not really what I'm talking about." And she smiled and said, "Take off work again and come today." And I smiled my best Midwestern smile. You know those Midwestern smiles that you can weaponize? And I said, "Okay, but how do people know to come today? Is anyone officially telling them that?" And she laughed and said, "Just look at all these people. It's a mess." And I, realizing that we had reached common ground, agreed. Yes, it's a mess. And I bid her adieu. And trusting my clergy collar again, I waited until she looked the other way, and I snuck into the actual ICE check-in waiting room, which is actually what the security guard is supposed to keep me from doing. But hey, I was in my clergy drag, so I was feeling frisky. So I made my way through the hundreds of people waiting, and I approached the receptionist and basically started the whole conversation again. I said, "May I ask about yesterday's closing and how it affected those who were supposed to check in yesterday?" And he said, "They just come back again today." And I said, but did anyone tell them not to come yesterday? And he said, it's common sense. And I said, but what about the folks who took off from work? And how would they really know to come back in the next day? And he said, it's common sense that when you can't check in one day, you come the next day. And I said, but don't you have a full schedule of people who are scheduled to check in today? And he said, it's common sense. So then, while this receptionist proceeded to further outline the definition of common sense for me, I heard the accent of one of the ICE officers I know really well. I call her the Ice Queen. I started to listen to what she was saying a few feet away from me, and she was screaming. So I was listening to her screaming in my left ear while common sense was explained to me in my right ear. And she was saying to this man, what are you doing here? And he said, I want to check in. And she said, do you have an appointment? And he said, I had an appointment yesterday. And she screamed, you can't be here today. Look at all these people. You have to make another appointment. Your appointment was yesterday. And she slammed her door. And he looked at me. And I, very pastorally, shrugged my shoulders in helpless affirmation, which I'm sure did him a lot of good. Common sense. And so I thanked the receptionist very sincerely because I was wearing my clergy drag. And I turned to walk back to the bond office, and I started to wend my way back through the crowd, and it all seemed so godless, so insane, so devoid of any sense of order or humanity or justice, godless. And I made my way into the hallway where there were usually sometimes like maybe just a few people waiting, but there now was just wall-to-wall chaos. And then I made eye contact with this young woman. And she was waiting so patiently. She had like a stack of papers in her hand. And I kept eye contact with her, and she kept the eye contact with me. And then she said, bless you, Father. Thank you, Father. And I started to say, no, I am not a priest. But before I could say it, she took both of my hands in her hands, and she said, God is with us. And I didn't know what to say. I just used my uncommon sense. And I said, you're right. God is with us. It was only one quiet little line. But that woman was inviting me into a Magnificat. We were surrounded by chaos and madness and cruelty and intentionally broken systems. And she knew the violence of it so much more intimately than I did. But by God, that woman freaking knew. And she was teaching me a Magnificat. God is with us, Emmanuel. And no matter what, God is with us. I was the one wearing the clergy collar, and she was the one with the sermon. Where is your joy? Who is God? What makes you Magnificat? My answer to all three of those questions today is that woman. Tomorrow, my answer, hopefully, will be something different because there's all around us things like that. Beautiful poetry, beautiful Magnificats being sung around us, being offered to us. Things that we can learn when we've forgotten in the godless chaos. And these answers are the things that maddening, intentionally broken systems of empire cannot steal away from us. So Jenny and Jeff are about to come up here. They're going to sing some more answers, some more Magnificats, some more things that just might fill that godless, joy-shaped hole. So Jenny and Jeff, come on up and sing for us. And while they're singing, I urge you all to use your uncommon sense.